Ladies and gentlemen, in this world we are constantly bombarded by noise, external distractions, opinions, and the relentless pace of modern life. We are told who to be, what to strive for, and what success should look like. But there is a quiet truth we often overlook. True growth, true understanding, and true peace lie not in the clamor of the world, but in the stillness within ourselves. Today I invite you to reflect on the power of focusing on yourself and the profound wisdom of staying silent. First, true growth begins with inner reflection. We live in a time where the external world demands our attention constantly. But what if I told you that the greatest journey you will ever undertake is the one inside? To focus on yourself is to embark on a path of self-discovery where your thoughts, desires, and fears are brought into the light. Silence becomes the mirror through which you can witness your own soul. It is in the quiet moments of stillness, free from distractions, that you can begin to hear your own voice, untainted by the noise around you. And it is in this silence that true understanding of who you are emerges. Second, silence offers us the opportunity to confront our shadow. Every human being carries a shadow, a part of ourselves that we may wish to deny, suppress, or ignore. It is easy to look outward and judge others, but it is far more difficult to turn inward and confront the darkness within. When we are quiet and still, we give ourselves the chance to face these aspects of ourselves that we may have been running from. To focus on yourself in silence is not to escape, but to embrace those hidden parts of your soul, the parts that, when acknowledged, can bring about true wholeness. When we make peace with our shadow, we become more integrated, more whole, and more authentic. Only through this internal integration can we stand fully in our power. Finally, true peace comes when we find balance between our inner and outer worlds. We often think of silence as a retreat, a withdrawal from life, but that's not what it is. True silence doesn't separate us from the world. It brings us closer to it in a more profound way. When we cultivate silence and focus on ourselves, we create a sense of inner peace that allows us to engage with the world around us with clarity and strength. It's only when we've found this balance between the inner quiet and the external noise that we can move through life with purpose, not driven by the opinions or expectations of others, but from a place of self-understanding. So, I ask you today to make a choice to focus on yourself and embrace silence. In this stillness, you will not find emptiness, but rather a profound depth of wisdom and peace. You will find the courage to face your shadow, and you will learn to live in balance with both your inner and outer worlds. The path to understanding, to authenticity, and to true peace begins not with loud declarations or constant striving. It begins in silence. True growth in its most profound sense does not arise from the constant noise and hustle of the external world. It emerges from a space that many of us seldom visit, the inner realm of reflection. In a world where distractions are abundant, the idea of focusing on oneself can seem counterintuitive, even indulgent. Yet it is within this very practice of turning inward that we unlock the doors to a deeper understanding of who we truly are. The journey of self-discovery is not one that can be found in the opinions of others or in the social constructs around us. It is found in the silence and solitude of our own minds, where we can observe, question, and confront our own thoughts, emotions, and desires. At the heart of focusing on oneself is the act of quiet reflection. This is not about self-centeredness in a selfish sense, nor is it about withdrawing from the world in a way that isolates us from the people and experiences that shape our lives. Rather, it is about stepping back from the constant bombardment of external stimuli to give ourselves the time and space to truly listen to what is within. In this silence, we are afforded the rare opportunity to hear our own voice, This voice is often drowned out by the cacophony of societal expectations, familial pressures, and the constant stream of media that fills our lives with noise. But when we take a moment to quiet the external world, we can begin to hear our own thoughts and feelings in their purest form. Inner reflection is not simply a matter of thinking or meditating. It is a process of becoming deeply attuned to the internal landscape of the mind. It is the act of pausing, stepping away from the noise, and engaging in a kind of listening that requires us to look beyond the surface level of our experiences. This is not a passive exercise, it is an active, intentional practice of being present with ourselves, of allowing our thoughts to arise and pass without judgment, and of cultivating an awareness that is free from external influence. Through this process, we come to recognize the complexity of our inner world. The mind is a labyrinth full of contradictions, desires, fears, and untapped potential. By focusing on ourselves, we begin to peel back the layers of our psyche and gain insight into the patterns that shape our lives. These patterns may be conscious habits, preferences, beliefs, but they can also be unconscious, embedded deep within us in ways we are not immediately aware of. When we take the time to reflect, we give ourselves the opportunity to recognize these patterns, to understand their origins, and to decide whether they continue to serve us or need to be changed. In focusing on yourself, you enter a process of self-examination that is often uncomfortable but ultimately rewarding. Our thoughts and behaviors are shaped by years of conditioning, by the messages we've received from our families, cultures, and societies. These external influences are often led us to believe certain things about ourselves that may not be true, or they have shaped us into versions of ourselves that we feel are not authentic. Inner reflection provides the space to challenge these beliefs and to ask difficult questions. Who am I really beneath all of the labels and expectations? What do I truly want, not based on what others want for me, but based on my own desires? These are the types of questions that arise when we begin to focus on ourselves in earnest. The act of reflection also allows us to assess our emotions and behaviors with greater clarity. So much of our daily lives are filled with automatic reactions, knee-jerk responses to situations and people. These reactions are often born from unconscious patterns that we have developed over time. However, when we take the time to reflect, we create the space to step back from these automatic responses and to observe them objectively. Why did I react that way? What was the deeper motivation behind that action? What was I afraid of? And why did I respond with anger or fear? These questions help us gain insight into the emotional undercurrents that drive our behaviors. By focusing on ourselves in this way, we can begin to unravel these complex emotional patterns and choose to respond in ways that are more aligned with our authentic selves. Another profound aspect of focusing on oneself through reflection is the ability to develop greater self-compassion. In a world that often values productivity, achievement, and outward success, it can be easy to neglect the importance of caring for ourselves. We are taught to focus on others, to meet their needs, and to perform for external validation. But this kind of outward focus often leads to burnout, dissatisfaction, and feelings of inadequacy. When we take the time to reflect on ourselves, we begin to cultivate a sense of kindness and understanding towards our own struggles and shortcomings. We realize that we too are worthy of love, compassion, and care. This self-compassion is not a luxury. It is a necessity for emotional and psychological well-being. Without it, we cannot fully embrace who we are or move forward with clarity and purpose. Furthermore, inner reflection offers us the chance to reconnect with our sense of purpose. Life can often feel like a series of disconnected events where we follow one task or goal after another without ever stopping to ask why we are doing any of it. We may chase after success, wealth, or approval, only to find that these external goals do not bring us the fulfillment we anticipated. When we focus on ourselves, we can pause and ask deeper existential questions. What is my purpose in life? What do I value most? What would I do if I could live without fear of judgment or failure? These questions are crucial for understanding our true motivations and aligning our actions with our deeper values. When we understand our purpose, we gain the clarity to live more intentionally, making choices that are congruent with who we are rather than who we think we should be. The process of reflection also helps us to cultivate a deeper connection with our intuition. We are often taught to rely on external validation, logic, and reason to guide our decisions. While these are valuable tools, they are not the only means of knowing. Intuition, the ability to understand something without the need for conscious reasoning, can be a powerful guide. But in order to connect with our intuition, we must quiet the noise around us and turn in. By doing so, we create the conditions in which our intuitive wisdom can emerge. It is often in these quiet moments of self-reflection that we experience flashes of insight, creative ideas, or a deep sense of knowing that guides us forward. It is also important to note that focusing on oneself does not mean living in isolation or neglecting the needs of others. Rather, it is through this inner reflection that we come to understand ourselves more fully, which in turn allows us to engage more meaningfully with the world around us. By knowing ourselves, we are better able to empathize with others, to communicate authentically, and to contribute to the world in ways that are aligned with our true selves. When we understand our own desires, limitations, and emotions, we become more attuned to the experiences of those around us. In the end, the practice of focusing on oneself through inner reflection is a lifelong journey. It is not a destination, but a process, a continuous unfolding of self-awareness and self-discovery. As we reflect on ourselves, we learn more about our strengths, our weaknesses, our desires, and our fears. We come to understand what drives us and what holds us back. We also come to realize that we are not static beings, but dynamic, ever-evolving creatures capable of growth, transformation, and renewal. This journey is not always easy. It requires courage to face the parts of ourselves that we may not want to acknowledge and to confront the uncomfortable truths that may arise. But it is through this process of self-discovery that we come to realize our fullest potential. It is only by focusing on ourselves, by taking the time to engage with our inner world, that we can live lives that are truly authentic, purposeful, and meaningful. In a world that is constantly demanding more of us, the practice of focusing on yourself and engaging in deep reflection is an act of radical self-care and self-empowerment. It is a recognition that true growth comes not from the approval or validation of others, but from the courage to listen to and understand our own hearts and minds. When we allow ourselves the space to reflect, we begin to see ourselves as we truly are, not as the world tells us we should be, but as the unique, complex, and whole individuals we are meant to be. And in this recognition, we find the strength to move forward in life with clarity, purpose, and authenticity. Within each of us lies a part of ourselves that we often keep hidden, a part that we are reluctant to acknowledge and confront. This is our shadow, a concept that refers to the darker, often unconscious aspects of our personality, emotions, and experiences that we tend to deny or repress. These aspects can include everything from our deepest fears and insecurities to our hidden desires, impulses, and traits we perceive perceive as undesirable. The shadow, in its essence, is everything we are unwilling to embrace or even admit exists within us. Yet, it is only by focusing on ourselves and engaging with the silence that we can begin to understand and integrate this aspect of our psyche, ultimately leading to greater self-awareness, growth, and authenticity. To understand the importance of confronting our shadow, we must first explore why we tend to hide certain parts of ourselves. Throughout our lives, we receive messages from society, family, culture, and even our own experiences that shape how we perceive ourselves. These messages often come with values, expectations, and judgments about what is considered acceptable or good behavior. We learn what is rewarded and what is punished, what is praised and what is criticized. As we internalize these values, we begin to shape our identity around what is deemed worthy or acceptable by external standards. The parts of ourselves that do not fit these standards, the parts that are seen as weak, irrational, or imprecious, are often repressed. We push them into the unconscious mind, hoping that by ignoring them we can avoid judgment or rejection. However, by repressing these aspects of ourselves, we are not eliminating them. Instead, we are denying an essential part of our wholeness, and in doing so we create a separation within our psyche. This split results in a lack of integration, and we may find ourselves caught in patterns of behavior that feel incongruent with our true selves. We may act in ways that feel forced or unnatural, or we may experience internal conflict when we encounter situations that challenge the version of ourselves we have constructed. The shadow is not just a passive, hidden part of us. It actively influences our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in ways that we are often unaware of. When left unchecked, the shadow can manifest in destructive patterns that can affect our relationships, career choices, and even our sense of well-being. It is through silence, self-reflection, and inner focus that we begin to engage with the shadow. When we give ourselves the space to reflect in stillness, we create an environment that allows the unconscious mind to surface. This is not a process that happens quickly or easily. Our minds are often reluctant to face the parts of ourselves that we have spent years trying to suppress. These parts of our psyche are tied to old wounds, unresolved conflicts, and unprocessed emotions that we may not want to confront. The act of focusing on ourselves and staying silent opens up the possibility of those emotions and memories emerging. Those emotions that we may have buried deep within us, hoping they would disappear. However, silence is not just about allowing these feelings to surface. It is about acknowledging them without judgment. It is in the quiet space of reflection that we can begin to embrace our shadow rather than reject it. This confrontation with the shadow is often uncomfortable. It can be difficult to look at ourselves honestly, especially when we uncover aspects that we may not like or understand. It is tempting to turn away from these parts of ourselves and go back to the familiar, safe narratives we have created about who we are, but in doing so, we deny the fullness of our humanity. To be truly whole, we must integrate the shadow, which means acknowledging its existence and accepting that these darker aspects of ourselves are just as valid as the more conscious, acceptable parts. It is only through this integration that we can achieve a sense of balance and inner peace. Ignoring or denying the shadow does not make it go away. It simply prevents us from living authentically. The process of integrating the shadow involves confronting the parts of ourselves that we may deem negative or unacceptable. For example, we may realize that we have a tendency toward jealousy, anger, or selfishness, traits that we have learned to view as undesirable. These traits are often tied to deeper, more vulnerable aspects of our psyche, such as fear of inadequacy, insecurity, or a lack of self-worth. By focusing on ourselves and sitting with these uncomfortable emotions, we can begin to uncover their roots. We might discover that the jealousy we feel toward others is not about them at all, but about our own fears of not being good enough, of not being seen or valued. In this way, the shadow is not just a collection of undesirable traits, but a mirror that reflects our deepest vulnerabilities and unmet needs. Once we have acknowledged these aspects of our shadow, we must allow ourselves the space to accept them. This acceptance does not mean indulging in negative behaviors or using our shadow as an excuse for harmful actions. Rather, it means recognizing that these parts of ourselves are a natural and inevitable part of being human. We are not defined by our flaws or imperfections, but by our ability to embrace them and learn from them. In fact, our flaws and our vulnerabilities can become sources of strength when we accept them fully and integrate them into our conscious awareness. Through this integration, we become more compassionate toward ourselves and others. We come to understand that we are all complex beings, capable of both light and dark, and that neither side should be denied or ignored. One of the greatest gifts of engaging with our shadow is the growth that comes from it. When we integrate the parts of ourselves that we have previously denied, we unlock new levels of emotional maturity and self-awareness. The shadow holds within it untapped potential that can only be realized when we face it directly. For example, the very fear or insecurity that we once saw as wisdom and strength, the anger that we once buried can, when expressed in healthy ways, become a powerful catalyst for change. The vulnerability that we once feared can, when accepted, allow us to form deeper connections with others and with ourselves. In many ways, the shadow represents the parts of ourselves that we need to heal in order to become whole. When we choose to confront and integrate our shadow, we embark on a path of personal growth that is deeply transformative. We move from a place of self-judgment and denial to a place of acceptance and understanding. We stop seeing ourselves as fragmented or incomplete, and we begin to experience our wholeness. As we integrate our shadow, we become more capable of embracing the full range of human experience, the light and the dark, and we begin to live with greater authenticity and compassion. Moreover, embracing the shadow does not only lead to personal transformation, but it also allows us to relate to others in a more profound way. When we come to terms with our own imperfections, we become less judgmental of others. We no longer see people through the lens of idealized expectations or stereotypes, but as complex individuals who are also struggling with their own shadows. This shift in perspective fosters empathy, understanding, and connection. We begin to recognize that everyone carries a shadow and that we are not so different from one another after all. In confronting the shadow, we also begin to experience a greater sense of freedom. For so long, the shadow has held us captive, influencing our behavior in unconscious ways and preventing us from living fully. By facing it head-on, we take back our power. We no longer allow the hidden parts of ourselves to control us. Instead, we integrate them into our conscious awareness, allowing us to live more freely and authentically. The shadow, once feared and denied, becomes a source of empowerment. The process of integrating the shadow is not a one-time event, but a lifelong journey. We will continue to encounter new aspects of our shadow throughout our lives, and we will have countless opportunities to engage with and integrate them. Each time we confront a new part of ourselves that we have been avoiding, we expand our capacity for growth and self-awareness. As we continue this journey, we move toward greater wholeness, understanding, and acceptance. Ultimately, the process of embracing the shadow is an essential part of focusing on ourselves. It is through silence and reflection that we can connect with this hidden part of our psyche, and it is through embracing the shadow that we can achieve greater self-awareness and personal transformation. In doing so, we become more authentic, more compassionate, and more empowered. We no longer live in fear of the darker aspects of ourselves, but learn to use them as a source of strength and wisdom. By embracing the shadow, we move toward a life of wholeness, freedom, and deep inner peace. In the fast-paced world we inhabit today, it can be incredibly easy to become overwhelmed by the noise and distractions around us. The constant stream of information, the demands of work and relationships, the pressures to succeed, and the endless expectations placed upon us all contribute to a state of constant external engagement. In this environment, we often lose sight of ourselves and our inner world. We become so enmeshed with the external world that we forget the importance of cultivating inner peace and balance. The notion of focusing on oneself and remaining silent, however, is not a retreat from life. It is a necessary foundation for meaningful engagement with the world around us. True peace and balance come from within, and only by nurturing our inner selves can we authentically engage with the outer world in a way that is both deliberate and harmonious. Our modern society places an enormous emphasis on outward achievement. Success is often defined by what we have, what we do, and what we can show others. We are constantly measuring ourselves against others' standards, racing against time, and seeking validation through external accomplishments. But this relentless pursuit of external goals, whether it's career advancement, social status, or material wealth, can easily lead to a sense of emptiness, as these external markers of success often fail to fulfill our deeper emotional, psychological, and spiritual needs. We may achieve all the outward signs of success only to find ourselves feeling disconnected, lost, or unfulfilled. In such moments we realize that the external world cannot provide lasting peace or a sense of purpose. Instead, true peace is something that must come from within, cultivated through self-awareness, reflection, and inner harmony. In order to develop this inner peace, it is necessary to first understand the role that silence and introspection play in achieving balance. Silence in this sense does not simply refer to the absence of noise. It refers to a state of stillness and quiet where we can step back from the constant distractions of daily life and focus inwardly. It is through silence that we can hear the subtle whispers of our intuition, the deeper parts of our consciousness, and the truths that lie beneath the surface of our everyday thoughts. In the absence of external noise, we are able to listen to ourselves more clearly, to recognize what we truly need, and to gain clarity about our desires, motivations, and goals. When we embrace silence, we create space for self-reflection. It is in this quiet space that we can ask ourselves the difficult questions. What do I truly want from life? Am I living in alignment with my values and my authentic self? What is the deeper purpose behind my actions? These questions allow us to explore who we truly are, beneath the layers of societal expectations, cultural conditioning, and personal fears. Only through quiet reflection can we begin to answer these questions honestly and gain a better understanding of our true desires and motivations. This inner process of self-exploration, however, is not always easy. It requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to face our fears and insecurities, and to confront the parts of ourselves that we may have ignored or suppressed for years. It requires the courage to face the truth, however uncomfortable it may be. But it is only by doing so that we can achieve a deeper sense of balance and alignment with ourselves. Without this self-awareness, we are left to drift through life, reacting to external circumstances and living according to the expectations and pressures of others. This reactive mode of existence creates an inner imbalance as we become disconnected from our true selves and live according to what we think we should do rather than what we truly want and need. Focusing on oneself and remaining silent also allows us to engage with our inner emotions and thoughts without the interference of external opinions. In a world that is constantly telling us how we should feel, think, or behave, it can be easy to become disconnected from our true emotions and desires. We are often encouraged to suppress or ignore our feelings in order to fit in, to avoid conflict, or to maintain a facade of strength or composure. But this suppression comes at a cost. The more we suppress our true emotions, the more disconnected we become from our authentic selves. This disconnection creates an inner imbalance, as we are no longer in touch with what we truly feel, need, or desire. By focusing on ourselves in silence, we create a space in which our emotions can surface and be acknowledged. We can sit with our feelings, observe them without judgment, and understand their deeper origins. Through this process of emotional awareness, we can learn to navigate our emotions with greater ease and clarity. Rather than being overwhelmed or controlled by our emotions, we can choose to respond to them in a more balanced and conscious way. This ability to regulate and respond to our emotions with awareness is an essential aspect of achieving inner balance. Moreover, silence allows us to create boundaries between ourselves and the external world. In a culture that often values constant activity and engagement, it can be difficult to say no or to withdraw from external demands. However, the ability to set boundaries is essential for maintaining inner peace. Without clear boundaries, we risk becoming overwhelmed by the demands of others, leading to stress, burnout, and a loss of personal agency. Focusing on oneself and embracing silence allows us to step back from the external world and take the time we need to replenish our energy, process our emotions, and restore our sense of balance. By learning to honor our own needs and set healthy boundaries, we create space for inner peace and well-being. The process of focusing on oneself and embracing silence is not just about introspection, however. It is also about taking intentional action toward balance. Once we have gained clarity about who we are, what we need, and what we value, it is essential to bring that awareness into our daily lives. This may involve making changes to how we spend our time, who we spend our time with, and the activities we engage in. It may require us to let go of certain relationships, commitments, or habits that no longer serve our well-being. Achieving balance requires conscious effort and the willingness to make choices that are aligned with our true selves, even if those choices are difficult or uncomfortable. Furthermore, balance is not a static state. It is an ongoing process of recalibration. Our lives are constantly changing, and the demands of the external world will always shift. The key to maintaining balance lies in our ability to remain flexible and adaptable while still staying grounded in our inner sense of self. This requires a continual commitment to self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-care. It requires the willingness to step back, reflect, and make adjustments as necessary in order to maintain harmony between our inner and outer worlds. True balance comes when we are able to integrate our inner peace with our external reality. It is not enough to simply focus on ourselves in silence and reflection. We must also learn to live in a way that reflects the insights and awareness we have gained from this inner work. When we cultivate a deep sense of inner peace, we can engage with the external world from a place of clarity, strength, and authenticity. We are no longer reactive or driven by external pressures. Instead, we act from a place of conscious intention. This alignment between our inner and outer worlds is what allows us to navigate life with grace, resilience, and purpose. In essence, focusing on ourselves and staying silent is not an escape from the world, but a means of returning to it with greater presence and intention. When we take the time to cultivate inner peace, reflect on our true desires and values, and set boundaries that protect our well-being, we are better equipped to engage with the world in a balanced and harmonious way. The process of focusing on oneself is not an act of selfishness, but one of self-care and self-awareness. It is only when we are in tune with our own needs, emotions and desires that we can truly show up for others and contribute to the world in a meaningful way. Ultimately, true balance comes from within, and it is through silence and reflection that we can achieve the clarity and harmony necessary to navigate both our inner and outer worlds. In conclusion, the journey of focusing on oneself and embracing silence is a powerful and transformative process. In a world constantly demanding our attention and energy, it is easy to become disconnected from our true selves. However, by turning inward and engaging in quiet reflection, we create the space necessary for self-discovery, personal growth, and inner peace. The shadow that resides within each of us, though often hidden or denied, holds the key to understanding our deepest fears, desires and potential. By confronting and integrating this shadow, we come to know ourselves more fully, embracing both our strengths and vulnerabilities. Through silence and introspection, we also cultivate the ability to regulate our emotions, set healthy boundaries, and reconnect with our authentic needs and desires. Inner peace is not something that can be found through external achievements or societal validation. It is something that must be nurtured within. When we focus on ourselves and remain silent, we gain clarity about who we truly are and what we truly need. This clarity allows us to live with greater authenticity, to act with intention, and to respond to the world around us from a place of balance and self-awareness. Ultimately, the practice of focusing on oneself is not an act of isolation or self-centeredness, but a means of returning to the world with greater purpose and presence. When we cultivate inner peace and authenticity, we can engage with others and the world in ways that are meaningful, compassionate, and aligned with our true values. It is only by turning inward, embracing the silence, and confronting our shadow that we can achieve the wholeness and balance necessary to live a life of fulfillment and purpose. Therefore, let us recognize the power and importance of silence, self-awareness, and inner reflection, for it is through these practices that we can achieve not only personal growth, but also contribute more fully to the world around us.